Today's episode is titled Fact Check Series 32 Facts on Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. This article has been written by Thomas McNulty. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. is synonymous with the Black Lives Matter movement. Thus, we celebrate the pioneering human rights activist and civil rights movement leader. We hope that these 32 facts will help you understand Dr. King and his dream better.
Because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Yes, he's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. Yes.
Fact 1. When Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, his birth name was actually Michael King Jr. However, his father, Michael King Sr., was inspired by theologist and Protestant Reformist Martin Luther after a trip to Germany in 1934. This led to him changing his own name and the name of his son to Martin Luther King. Fact 2. King's speeches were not intended purely for Southerners. He also directed his attention towards racist Northerners with equal zeal. He challenged segregation in northern cities such as Boston and Chicago, which led to backlash from some of his northern white supporters.
There were no more seats left other than these seats reserved for whites only. Negro passengers could not sit there.
Fact 3. He skipped several grades in school, including the first grade, 9th grade, and his senior year of high school. This led to him enrolling in Morehouse College, his father's alma mater, at the age of 15. He would go on to earn his bachelor's degree in sociology from the Atlanta, Georgia-based college. Fact 4. Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King's wife, played her own essential role in the civil rights movement. She was responsible for organizing concerts to fund the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and gave the first speech at the conference's opening. When the King's house was bombed during the Montgomery bus boycott, she refused to leave town, determined to stay and continue supporting the movement. Fact 5. King's journey to bring positive change in America led him across the country, as well as outside of his borders. Throughout his career, King traveled to a newly independent Ghana, spoke in St. Paul's Cathedral in London, and stayed with followers of Gandhi in India in order to spread his message. Fact 6. King's title of doctor comes from his time at Boston University. After attending different colleges and achieving 2 bachelor's degrees, one in sociology and another in divinity, Martin Luther King Jr. earned a PhD in systematic theology from Boston University in 1955. His dissertation was titled A Comparison of the Conceptions of God in the Thinking of Paul Tillich and Henry Nelson Weeman, and focused on comparing the two philosophers' views on God and engaging them against his own concepts. After his scholarly pursuits ended, King was awarded 18 additional honorary degrees from various institutions, including Howard University, Bard College, and Yale University.
Yes, I'm black. I'm proud of it. I'm black and beautiful.
Fact 7. Boston was an important part of King's life, and he even referred to the city as his second home. He attended Boston University, met his wife Coretta Scott, and delivered several speeches in the historic city. Residents of Boston were outraged by King's death, resulting in devastating riots. Fact 8. King was very unexpectedly thrust into the role of political activist and leader. During the 1953 bus boycott in Alabama, King was opposed to the protest because jobs were being put at risk. However, after allowing boycott organizers to use his church basement as a meeting spot, King was quickly adopted as the movement's leader and was forced to deliver his very first political speech. Fact 9. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy is still celebrated throughout the world. There are more than 50 statues dedicated to him in cities such as Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and Chicago. Worldwide, there are more than 1,000 city streets named after King, including in countries such as India, Haiti, and the United States. Fact 10. On January 30th, 1956, King's home in Alabama was bombed by white supremacists, while his wife Coretta and 7-month-old daughter Yolanda were inside. Thankfully, nobody was injured by the bombing, with the explosion merely damaging the front porch of the house. Fact 11. He won an oratory contest at the age of 14 in his junior year at Booker T. Washington High School, delivering a speech titled The Negro and the Constitution. This could be seen as the start of his political activism, as he would go on to deliver thousands of speeches throughout his career as an activist. Fact 12. King authored a number of books, including an autobiography and a collection of his favorite sermons. These books, including bestsellers such as The Measure of a Man, Why We Can't Wait, and Stride Towards Freedom, detail King's political and philosophical ideals while also mapping out the aspirations of the civil rights movement. Fact 13. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. won a Grammy Award for the Best Spoken Word album. The speech, recorded on vinyl, titled Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam, was focused on King's opposition to America's involvement in that conflict. The award was won at the 13th Annual Grammy Awards in 1970. Fact 14. John F. Kennedy's successful campaign for President of the United States is often attributed to his support of Martin Luther King Jr. In October 1960, King was unjustly jailed for participating in a protest in Georgia. Kennedy contacted Coretta Scott King and offered his support, which in turn earned Kennedy the support of African Americans. Kennedy's election is often credited to this massive amount of support.
The devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it.
Fact 15. King and his future wife Coretta Scott were set up by a mutual friend named Mary Powell. The first conversation between King and Scott occurred over the telephone while they planned to meet in person. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott were married in Alabama on June 18, 1953. Unfortunately, no hotels in the area would allow a black couple to stay the night. So, the newlyweds spent their first night of marriage in the back room of a funeral home. Fact 16. While King is most well known as a civil rights activist, he also spoke out for other causes as well. He was a vocal advocate for universal healthcare and basic income, which would have benefited a wide range of Americans. He also opposed the Vietnam War, which was seen as a controversial opinion at the time. His religious beliefs made him an advocate of non-violence, and he was a staunch opponent of classism and poverty.
I maintain hope in spite of hope, and I've talked about the difficulties and how hard the problems will be as we tackle them.
Fact 17. He inspired the largest petition in American history, as well as the Stevie Wonder song Happy Birthday, which were intended to support the making of his birthday into a national holiday. King's birthday was made a national holiday by President Ronald Reagan in 1983. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is celebrated on the third Monday in January, near his January 15th birthday. He and George Washington are the only Americans whose birthdays are national holidays. Fact 18. While King's speeches were beautifully written and planned out, he was also prone to improvisation. This is likely attributed to his experience as a minister. where passion is often preferred over just sticking to the script. The end of his iconic I Have a Dream speech was mostly improvised. For example, Fact 19. Martin Luther King Jr. is to this day the youngest man to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. He was awarded the prize in 1964 when he was only not 35 years old. The prize also came with a $54,000 prize, which was used to continue fueling the civil rights movement. The youngest person to ever receive the Nobel Peace Prize is Malala Yousafzai, who was awarded the prize in 2014 when she was only 17 years old. Fact 20. King was deeply interested in music from a young age. His mother was an organist, and King himself sang in his church's gospel choir. Hymns and jazz were his favorite, and the power of music is said to have been a huge part of King's belief system. Fact 21. King worked a paper route for the Atlanta Journal from a very early age. By age 13, he was promoted to be the delivery station's assistant manager. Fact 22. King's last words before being assassinated were reportedly directed towards musician Ben Branch. King planned to attend an event where Branch would be playing his saxophone and requested that the musician perform the song "Precious Lord, Take My Hand." King was tragically shot very shortly after making the request. Fact 23. King's iconic I Have a Dream speech was not his first public address delivered at the Lincoln Memorial. 6 years prior, on May 17, 1957, King participated in the prayer pilgrimage for freedom in front of between 15,000 and 30,000 people. King spoke about voting rights in a well-regarded speech. It was his first public address before a national audience.
We face the difficulties of today and tomorrow. I still have a dream.
Fact 24. King, like his father, was an ordained minister. While King initially wasn't interested in following the family vocation, Morehouse College professor Dr. George D. Kelsey influenced him to follow in his father's footsteps. King was fully ordained on February 18, 1948, at the age of 19, before his graduation from Morehouse. He later went on to graduate as valedictorian of his class at Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he earned his bachelor's in divinity along with several awards. Fact 25. Throughout his career, King was imprisoned 29 times for a variety of reasons. He was arrested on charges of varying severity, including civil disobedience, perjury, and speeding in his car. Fact 26. King was nearly assassinated almost a decade before the assassination that took his life. On September 20th, 1958, a woman named Izola Ware Curry stabbed King in the chest with a 7-inch long letter opener. The blade nearly cut King's aorta, and hours of surgery were needed to save his life. From his hospital bed, King issued a statement that reaffirmed his belief in nonviolence and claimed no ill will towards his attacker. Fact 27. King was an avid reader, and his beliefs were inspired by great philosophers such as Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Aristotle, and Plato. His greatest inspiration, however, apparently came from Henry David Thoreau's 1849 essay, Civil Disobedience. The essay is centered around the avoidance of complacency in the face of unjust laws, encouraging people to stand up against systematic injustice. Fact 28. Many of King's followers, including members of his own family, believe that King's killer was not acting alone. Many believe that assassin James Earl Ray was part of a larger conspiracy to kill King, and Ray himself recanted his plea 3 days after pleading guilty. Coretta Scott King believed that the state or federal government was involved in the event, and a Memphis jury agreed that the assassination was a conspiracy in a 1999 civil trial.
We thank God for giving us a leader who was willing to die, but not willing to kill.
Fact 29. King's mother, Alberta Williams King, was also killed by a gunman. On June 30th, 1974, 6 years after her son's death, King was shot and killed within the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, during a Sunday morning service. The gunman, Marcus Wayne Chenault Jr., rose from the front pew of the church and opened fire on Alberta King, who was playing the organ and a church deacon. Chenault claimed that his original target had been Martin Luther King Sr., who was also present at the service. The King family's opposition to capital punishment saved Chenault from the death penalty, and he instead received life imprisonment. Fact 30. Martin Luther King Jr. had a cooperative relationship with President John F. Kennedy, particularly on matters of civil rights. Kennedy consulted with King via telephone during a race riot in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. King agreed to contain the violent riots and advised Kennedy to publicly condemn the bombings being conducted by white supremacists. This cooperation led to several peaceful weeks in Birmingham. Fact 31. Despite a relatively brief 12-year career as an activist, King gave a huge number of public addresses. Between weekly church sermons and massive media events, it is estimated that Martin Luther King Jr. delivered upwards of 2,500 public speeches. All of these speeches were intended to spread Martin Luther King's message of nonviolence and pride, even amongst violent backlash. Fact 32. King's final speech, known as the "I've Seen the Mountaintop" address, was delivered at Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee on April 3, 1968. The speech is well known because it suggests that King knew his death may have been imminent due to threats on his life received in the days prior to the address. In the speech, King declares, "Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will." King was killed the day after delivering the speech on April 4th, 1968.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
We at Hollywood Insider respect, honor, and admire Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Human rights activism is at the core of Hollywood Insider's values and mission statement. Dr. King, your activism and wisdom has helped us at Hollywood Insider continuously bolster our mission to better our world through unity. Black Lives Matter continues to be at the core of human rights activism. Dr. King, you will always be one of our heroes. United States of America is better because of its shining citizen and black human rights leader named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.